A black day in Kuki history. The fallen commander who carried a people's dream. June 30th, 2025. The hills of Kuki-controlled territory fell into mourning this week, as news broke of the brutal assassination of one of the Kuki National Army's most respected and senior commanders, Thangboi, affectionately known as Tapi. Alongside him, two young bodyguards, loyal to the last moment, also perished in the ambush near Hunglhungjou village. A civilian woman, a bystander with no part in the conflict, tragically lost her life in the chaos. For the Kuki people, this was more than a military loss. It was a heartbreaking rupture in the soul of a united resistance. There are moments in every struggle that cast long shadows over memory, unity, and hope. This was one of them. A man who stood for his people. Tapi was not merely a soldier, he was a symbol of courage, discipline, and enduring loyalty to the cause of the Kuki people. Since the founding of the Kuki National Army in 1988, he had served with distinction, rising through the ranks not by force or favor, but by unwavering commitment. Those who knew him spoke of his humility and clarity of purpose. In camp, he was a quiet commander, commanding respect not through fear, but through dedication. On the battlefield, he was relentless, a figure who carried not only a rifle, but the hopes of an entire generation. In recent years, especially during the violent escalation of the ethnic conflict since 2023, Tapi's presence became even more significant. He stood tall as a steady hand during moments of fear and fury, reminding young fighters and civilians alike of what they were struggling for: survival, dignity, and a homeland that could be called their own. The ambush that shook a nation. At around midday, on the outskirts of Hunglhungjou village, the calm of the hills was shattered. Automatic rifle fire erupted in a sudden, coordinated ambush. Tapi's vehicle was targeted at close range. The attack left him and his two aides dead on the spot. More than a dozen shell casings were recovered at the site, haunting reminders of a calculated strike. Amid the gunfire, a woman passing through the area was struck and fatally wounded. Her death speaks to a cruel truth of such violence. The innocent are always at risk. She is now mourned not just as a victim, but as a tragic symbol of how internal conflict leaves deep, indiscriminate wounds. The two bodyguards who died alongside Tapi were men in their prime. Known in their villages for discipline and loyalty, they served not just as protectors, but as brothers in arms, walking with Tapi through years of struggle. Their deaths, though quieter in media headlines, are no less devastating to the families and communities they leave behind. The weight of grief and the echo of loss. In the aftermath of the ambush, the silence in many Kuki villages was not just of shock, it was of mourning. Tapi's loss sent shockwaves not just through the Kuki National Organization, KNO, the parent body of the KNA, but through every household that has ever offered shelter, food, or prayer for the movement. To many, he was more than a military figure. He was the embodiment of resilience, a man who bore the burden of unity when fractures threatened to appear. His voice in meetings, his presence in forward bases, and his quiet assurances during the darkest nights, these are memories that his comrades will carry forever. The struggle now stands at a crossroads. Tapi gave his life for a vision larger than himself. A vision of a homeland where the Kuki people could live without fear, where their customs, governance, and culture could flourish. His death comes at a time when external threats remain very real, from ethnic tensions to state repression. But it also comes at a moment when internal unity is fraying. He had often spoken, in private circles and in informal gatherings, about the need to stay united. He knew the dangers of division. He knew the power of solidarity. In his final months, comrades say, he became more vocal about peace within the movement, about the importance of remembering why they had taken up arms in the first place. His death now leaves a painful question in its wake. Can the movement stay true to that path of unity without him? Calls for reflection and reconciliation. In the wake of this tragedy, voices from across the Kuki Hills have risen, not in anger but in mourning and in appeal. The Kuki Impi, revered as the traditional guardian of the Kuki people's political will, issued a heartfelt plea. Let this not become another wound that divides us further. Let it become the fire that purifies our resolve. Church leaders have offered prayers in packed congregations, their sermons focused on forgiveness, unity, and the weight of shared loss. Youth groups, who once sang revolutionary songs under Tapi's command, now sing laments for the fallen. There are calls for restraint, for inquiry, for truth, but most importantly, for reconciliation. There is a growing recognition that the Kuki arms movement must not devour its own. That if the dream of a secure homeland is to be realized, it must be pursued not through fratricide, but through brotherhood. The mother who walked that day. Though most attention is on the commanding officer's death, it is important to pause and remember the civilian woman who died that day. She was not wearing a uniform. She was not carrying a weapon. She was merely passing through, perhaps heading to her fields or returning from a visit. In a matter of seconds, her life was taken. Her family's world was shattered, and the collective conscience of the Kuki community bears another scar. Her name will not be forgotten. Just as we honor the warriors, we must honor in memory, in resolve. As funerals are held and flags are flown at half-mast, the Kuki community faces a profound moment of reckoning. Dapi's life reminds us of the purpose behind the struggle. His death reminds us of the cost, and the choice ahead reminds us of the responsibility we carry, not just to the past, but to the generations yet unborn. If there is any justice in history, it will remember Thangboi Halkip, not as a casualty of conflict, but as a martyr of unity, a man who carried the weight of a people's dream on his shoulders and who fell, not in vain, but as a light for others to follow. Let this moment be not the breaking point, but the beginning of healing. Let the Kuki movement remember what it once stood for, and let that memory guide its path forward. Disclaimer from Zelengam Media. Zelengam Media is an independent platform committed to documenting the stories, struggles, and voices of the Kuki people. This article is based on available reports, local sources, and eyewitness accounts. We do not endorse any armed group or faction. Our intent is to inform, memorialize, and promote dialogue for peace and unity.